So, today we're going to talk about how government works, and in the previous lecture I explained how the Whitehall system in the UK worked, and it's hence a quite top-down system with a rotating group of middle managers who hence carry the culture of the place and form a single group really with others who are in industry and others who are in other parts of civil society in Britain, including the top journalists, the top financiers. You may call them the fixers, the upper middle class people who don't challenge the people who own the place, but they do run the place. They marry each other, they go to similar places. Now, it's a particular system of government which is not in fact the most efficient system of government, but it is one that is well known and that is easy to describe. The more efficient system of government can be found in Singapore, Scandinavia, Taiwan, the Netherlands, and those are more egalitarian societies, and they do things differently. And in order to sort of get an idea as to, okay, well, how do they function differently, I want you to try and work out a particular policy. So I want you to have in your mind's eye the following policy problems. Suppose as a ministry or as a government, or really as a population, you're worried about the well-being of teenagers. You worry about them binge drinking, you're worried about their drug use, you're worried about them being bullied at school, you worry about them having too much social media. You basically have a lot of worries about your teenagers, and you would like schools, or you would like to empower schools to help those teenagers. I'd want you to be in two small groups. So I want you to be in two groups and sketch for me, okay, you're in the ministry, you've got quite a few resources, you've got quite a bit of power. How would you help schools, help the well-being of teenagers with their separate problems? So, can I ask the group on the left, what, roughly speaking, did you have in mind as a group? How to tackle the problem of teenagers?
Okay, what we had in mind is to, at first, develop some sort of a focus group that establishes what kind of problem kids have in a local school, because we have different societal and economical environments. So people from different environments have different kind of problems. So first of all, to establish this, and then have implement the classes that focus on developing interpersonal relationship, on teaching kids multiple different experiences, like experience of a breakup, experience of a friendship, experience of anything that is interpersonal, basically, which is really important, and also establish some sort of moral compass, because with the direction to openness and experimentalism, and you can be whatever you want, you don't have any sort of moral compass, because you choose it yourself, and many people make bad choice. And they get to suffer a lot. Some people need this freedom, but also when you have established understanding of this is right and this is wrong, or not even right, wrong, this is hurtful, and this leads to some good outcomes. So that's better.
So it's clear the outcome you're aiming for, right? A moral compass, sort of a...
I'm not finished.
No, but I'm going to ask the question now, which is, who is going to do this?
Obviously, yeah, I understand that. I suppose it would make sense to have common lessons for it, lessons for forever. Now that you ask me, I would answer a preacher, but not taking into consideration religion.
I don't just mean that. You're in the ministry. You're not in a school. How are you going to help this?
Well, to find teachers that can do that.
So you find teachers who can?
No, not me, some institution.
No, but okay. Is that the ministry as a policy and then finds people to implement it? That's the basic approach.
Yeah, it's to change educational structure where they have it in their curriculum.
Curriculum, yeah. Is that which is basically the Whitehall approach. What you suggest is the Whitehall approach. Pilots, right, focus groups, but basically the policy is set at the ministry, the outcomes are defined, and then you find people who implement it, and you've got accountability, whatever the policy is. That is the Whitehall approach. I mean, what you sketched in terms of trying to expose pupils to difficult circumstances, pretty much what they've done in South Australia at the primary school level, right? It's part of something that the Australian curriculum has. And they are exactly the Whitehall mentality. So effectively how you think of this as a Whitehall way. It's not the Dutch way.
I would love to continue because I didn't finish. The other thing that we want to do is we want to lessen the amount of the curriculum that is presented right now with all of the default lessons and not to go that much into speciality of things like math and all of the formulas that we study in the later school years. If somebody wants to to make it more divided. Some schools they do divide it for people who stay with sciences, people who stay with arts, people who stay with humanities. So basically use this approach and to also implement from higher school to go to certain jobs, to as many jobs as possible and to try collectively so the people have better understanding of what they like and what they don't like, where they belong, where they don't belong. They have clear focus on what they might want to do in their life.
And this is particularly from a Ukrainian school experience?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so what you sketch now is pretty much what the Polish education authorities did in the late 1990s. Because they had the same Soviet system, basically, of highly mathematical, physics-oriented education, which bored the shit out of most students who were not good at it. And they went into a more vocational, but also more a creativity maintaining form of education, which is more like the rest of Western Europe. So I'm surprised that Ukraine didn't do that as well, but they may be doing that. But basically what you sketch in that sense, that direction, is pretty much what quite a few of the former Eastern European countries have done the last 20 years. So in that sense, you're rediscovering something that is a logical way to go, as found out. Can I ask this group, what did they do?
Well, we were not thinking about problems, but we were thinking about, okay, what do the children need? So a more positive way to have the social activities and to make sure that all the children are reached. We like to implement it in school because they are already in school. They have to be in school, so part of the activities are over there, and then you also can mix groups. So after school you can be with your own friends, but in school, okay, you have different groups and try different, like sports and creative stuff and theatre and etc.
And the same question, who does this? You're in the ministry, who does this?
So I can answer that one. Basically, the way we had it set up is sort of, well, we at the ministry provide the finances and the sort of regulatory system to check that it's actually being done. You basically get local supplementary teachers. Maybe it's sort of part of the, you hire extra sport teachers or something like that. But you then have the after-school curriculum, basically run locally, and this you basically allow them to do things that suburb centres used to do. So you know, the recreation centre has a few sport activities going at any time, a few cultural activities going at any time. But this is run out of the schools, and once a Wednesday, sort of Wednesday afternoon, you also get the students to sort of rotate through the various activities they could be doing, with the basic hope that they have a lot more community engagement and social contact with other people out of school, because that's what we thought the thing they needed most was the sort of social contact with others around them. But yeah, there'd then be a voluntary system from the students to actually participate in the after-school versions, but run more or less locally by the people we then pay to do it.
So a bit more trust, as it were, in the school development also, what the programs are. Okay.
You can also connect it with activities in the neighborhoods.
Sure.
So you have more that you get to know your neighbors. Also
which is neighborhood dependent. So it's not like a national pilot which is then rolled out, which would be the Whitehall way, but more lots of experimentation at lots of schools because they have different neighborhoods. So how did they actually do this, right? This program was actually rolled out between 2014 and 2017 in the Netherlands. So it's part of what they call safety at school, and they had a welzijnswet, so they had laws on this. And effectively, what the ministry did was to sort of decide not to be in the way of what all the individual schools and the teachers there were doing. So because you're talking about a consensus society, they didn't have to convince schools about the problems. It was more that it was sort of enabling local solutions. And this was done in a very egalitarian way. So they wanted schools to every year have a survey of what the well-being of the students was. And in Whitehall, if you would do that, then the ministry would define what well-being is and have a particular survey, and everybody has to have that survey, and it is the same survey in every school. And you can in fact look up the results of these surveys. They exist in Whitehall. They exist in Britain. In the Netherlands, don't. Why not? It's to each individual school how they define well-being. So there is no single definition. Every school itself decides on that. What the ministry did provide was indeed a list of approved survey companies who each have a different approach to well-being and could come to the school and sort of get things. So they basically accredited, as it were, a group of survey providing companies, but the schools themselves could choose which one they would have, and that would indeed then be funded, right? So they allowed some funding for the school to find out, okay, how are our kids going? Because even in the school level with a few hundred students, you don't actually particularly know, right? But it was up to the school itself, hence to the teachers, the headmistresses, also the parents, to decide what the hell well-being was. Why? Well, because problems differ, right? In one neighborhood, drugs is a problem. In another neighborhood, social relations are a problem, or loneliness, or single parents. Very, very different. So it was up to the school. Now, the school was supposed to write a report on this, but didn't have to send it to the ministry, which would be unthinkable in Whitehall. In Whitehall, it's all about, well, tell Whitehall what's going to happen, and we'll punish you if you're not doing well in the league tables. No league tables. Schools write a report, they don't even have to alert anybody if there's no problems. If there are problems, then the school itself is supposed to find a solution, exactly along the lines that you discussed, right? We can have extra school activities, or the South Australia way, right? We show people problems with relations. But it's up to the school. It's up to the school to link to the police, social work, mosques, churches, whatever else is needed in the neighborhood. They make the initiatives. They basically work out what the policy is, every school. Now, of course, schools have joint problems, right? And so drugs may be an issue of 10 schools. They get together. The schools themselves get together, and there may be funds to help them come up with things. If they find, look, we've got serious problems, we need extra money, well, then they've got to, show that they had a plan, and that they sort of couldn't solve things, and that they want more help first from, the council, the city. Right? And then, the ministry will hear of it probably never, right? So in terms of embodied cognition, there's a lot of cognition at the local level, at the individual teachers. So for instance, individual teachers would be working out how something goes for school, and then that's not a national pilot, they have their own website. And other teachers somewhere else in the Netherlands could find those websites. So it's a more network of teachers who then inform each other how to do this, right? Now, that way of doing it, do you see how totally different this is to Whitehall? There's no accountability. There's no, this is the definition, this is the problem, and we're going to check that you've solved it, right? That is not so bad, because in the Whitehall system, who do you trust? You trust the policy mandarins. You trust the meritocratic upper middle class elite, right? Basically, you trust people like me, right? Who sort of get flown into the government, and the expert writes the report. That's whom they trust. And the rest is distrusted, so they have to, metrics and league tables, and ooh, you've done wrong, and they choose what is the priority problem, what is your measure for solving it, right? And okay, that's the Whitehall way, but the Dutch way is much more efficient, but you require a highly educated, consensus-oriented population, right? But it's much more efficient. You get much better outcomes on average, and Singapore is similar, right? A city of 4 or 5 million or something like that. Right? But you see how it's done? It's based on trust in everybody in the system. Everybody in the system is trusted, right? And it's a lot of local initiative by individual teachers, individual schools. They figure out themselves what well-being is. They write a report if they need one, right? And then they team up, and governments are then pushed to make extra money available for, more autists, more special education, more this, more that. But again, at the local level, it's sort of, okay, they sort of, we need to get these things in, we need to get these things in, and they talk to the council, right? Now, this would be unthinkable in Britain, and probably unthinkable in Ukraine, right? It would be kind of like, what? Right? I don't know, maybe you can say, would this be possible?
We'll find out.
Right? But you see
Later.
how this system of government fits a different society, right? Now, within Britain, do you know the regions that function like this? Wales and Scotland. So when Wales and Scotland were made more independent from Whitehall, they started doing things in the Scandinavian Dutch way because they have a more egalitarian society. So the Scottish well-being initiative doesn't have a definition, doesn't have this top-down cost-benefit from top, right? So Wales too, right? Much more egalitarian. So it's a different way in which the whole society is run. Now, I want you to, why can't England particularly do it the same way? Why is that just impossible? What is the bottleneck that England cannot switch to this much more efficient way? Because there have been English reformers who said, we need to do it this way. They've sketched it. It's kind of, it's just, no, can't work. Why not? What is in the way of this in England, particularly, rather than just the UK? It's really England for which this would not work.
Too much dead wood.
There's a lot of dead wood, but that is also a strength, right? To a certain extent, the UK system can employ a lot of low-quality people because they're just told what to do. So mindless morons basically have a role in the English system because it's a very simple, look, this is the menu. Every day you make peas, mashed potatoes. That's it, right? Just stick to the script. So the English system is actually very good at absorbing migrants. Why? Because it's pretty simple to slot into this, right? It's just command, control, you should do this. And we'll have a metric on you. That works with people with a different language, who don't yet know the culture. Well, we can all follow a script, right? So it allows you, the English system, the British system, is very good at absorbing people from very different cultures, very different religions, very different ways of doing things. Because they just start at the bottom. They're just people who are told what to do. The Dutch system cannot absorb those people. Imagine that kind of migrant who doesn't speak the language in the Dutch system, with all these people who trust each other, this and that. They would not know how to take initiative, they would not be trusted by the other teachers. So in the Netherlands, as a rule of thumb, it takes 3 generations, before finally their grandchildren are enough assimilated to the Dutch way of doing things that they can fit into this Dutch egalitarian high trust society stuff. 3 generations. What did they do the first 2 generations? Well, they either sort of a mindless, put in mindless jobs, on construction sites, or they set up their own little shop. They just go outside of these larger structures because they just can't function. They're not trusted, their Dutch is not good enough. And so a lot of the migrants who come to the Netherlands go away because they go to Britain, they go to these places where they can fit in a more top-down, easy fitting. So you see the swings and roundabouts? Okay, Dutch society is basically much better functioning, at least it was in 2016, this and that, right? It's a much more efficient, inclusive, warm system. But this takes generations of learning how the system works, right? You don't just switch to that. Now, can you think of another pro-con of these 2 systems? What's in the way, or what's the benefit of switching to the other system?
I think the Whitehall managers are not willing to lose their power.
Exactly. People might, like me, love writing the white papers. We'll do this for the whole country. It's this megalomania again, right? We're having real impact here, right? You could just see it, right? I mean, in that, in British society, they love this, right? It's the leader, right? And they compete to be the leader, right? But exactly, right? The top-down stuff is very popular, right? With the top-down people, right?
Yeah.
Right? But also the rest, they just compete then, right? And it's their vision of how the world works, the grand leader with the grand plan, right? even though, you know, there's all this embodied cognition stuff.
It makes empire building a lot easier, the Whitehall system.
Yep.
So if you've conquered some place and don't have a role for them because they're not part of the egalitarian society, well then, you know, they can
What
be
do you do with them?
exploited a little bit, but really you don't develop the place much. The sort of the British Empire, because were top down, would actually grow the places they conquered, because it's like, well, you have a role now, get better at your role, sort of build up the sort of India's a great example of this. Like, sure, the Brits mistreated them, but they also have railways and all that type of stuff, because sort of
they're just told what to do.
Useful as a British vassal. So for conquering, for expanding, the Whitehall system seems better suited than the Dutch system.
Absolutely, and this is very much indeed, you know, that's why Whitehall system is still there in Australia. That's why it's there in New Zealand. It copies easily in a different culture. Because, okay, you bring in your top manager, which would then be British, but you basically let the rest slot in. You just tell them what to do, right? And whatever level is limited. And then, okay, you gradually build up the ability of the local population to do the same. Now, apparently the Brits didn't do this in Africa, but they did do it in India, most definitely. And they did it in their own colonies, if you like. And the Dutch were notorious for not building much at all in Indonesia, right? It was very hard to build much, but they were good at extracting. right. And what Rob says is partly the reason why, right? I mean, you just don't transport the Dutch culture. I mean, it's just impossible. It takes generations. You're not making money whilst you're doing it, right? So you just don't do it, right? There's a bit of a colonial administration. It's just all about rent extraction, which has also advantages and disadvantages, but that's a different conversation to be had.
What about France or Italy?
France is similar. France is also top-down. France also absorbs migrants. And it also has these feeder school systems. It's got this notion of elite middle-class people, the Grande École, the Élysée. They're exactly like this, exactly this mentality. We are French, right? From within. So the French system and the English system have a lot of similarities to this, right? But there is a difference that the French really want you to be French, right? And so in Britain, it is, in that sense, less important, right? It's kind of like, look, if you want to be like us, totally adapt. If you don't want to be like us, it's fine, it's your problem. In France, it's much more nationalistic, but also this notion of you must become French, right? They have that in common with the Russians. It's an identity which sort of actively imposes itself on all the new migrants. So they get forced into reading Proust in the middle of that. Whereas in Britain, it's kind of like, you don't want to fit in, then, you know, if you create trouble, we put you in prison. If not, fine. Right? So in that sense, British society is in a strange way more tolerant of cultural diversity than France is. Right? But also in France, to a certain extent, it's much more quicker that you belong. You become French, which is hard to do in Britain. Right? It's hard to become English. Right? So the system is culturally different, is that it's more, yeah, you got to be like us, but also we're going to help you become like us, much more than in the Dutch, right? In the Dutch, it takes generations. The French, you can become French in a generation. Okay, more questions on this? Because this is a sort of difference of whole systems, right? And since we want you to have the ability to sort of think of this in a design way, right? Note that the crucial question, well, what are you actually going to do? Where do you put your trust? Who's actually going to do things? What is the role of the center? Is very different in the Netherlands from the UK.